Today, we become legends.
+1 changes for gods is one of the biggest things that people are excited for when their mains make the move to Smite 2, and there's so many gods that could use some extra spice or new ways to play. So I decided to start making a document of +1 changes for every god that hasn't made the move to the game yet. I don't have them all done at the moment, but I thought I'd share some ones I have in this video, and if it does well, maybe I'll share the rest of them when I'm done. So if you want to see that video, then drop a like to let me know you like these kind of vids. These are of course just ideas, and I don't have firm numbers or balance considerations for them, but without further ado, let's jump in with my first +1, which is for Arachnne. So you probably all know at this point that I'm generally in favor of a larger rework for Arachnne, but that's sort of beyond what a +1 change is meant to be. So for her, I just have a normal +1 for her web. If web contacts a valid terrain wall, it begins spinning a web tunnel to the other side. This tunnel opens after 30 seconds and lasts 2 minutes. Arachnne can interact with the tunnel for 2 seconds to travel to the other side. These tunnels can be used any number of times, but only by Arachnne. So this one is sort of a throwback to Arachne's old design, where she could sort of hyper jungle. Her old egg pods let her set up for camps or even solo Gold Fury in the early days, which I think was some fun design space to explore. This does a similar thing, but instead of helping her clear the jungle, it helps her get around the jungle more efficiently than other gods can. This would require a bit of planning and setup, of course, to get a network of tunnels going, but in the hands of a good Arachnne, this would allow her to outmaneuver most other junglers when traversing the jungle. I did put a long opening time and a 2-second interact channel on this so that it can't be easily used in combat, as that's not the intent of this +1, but it could of course be used to cut off enemies if you set up a tunnel beforehand. If more counterplay was needed, you could even let enemies destroy her tunnels, but yeah, I thought this one was pretty neat. Let me know down below if you're an Arachnne main and you like the idea. Same goes for all of these changes really. I play every god and have around half the roster to 10 masteries in Smite 1, but there's always more insight to be had from true mains of these gods. Moving on though, next up I have a more crazy +1 for Aquang. After landing from a successful execute, Aquang's basic abilities are replaced with draconic versions for their next cast. Draconic Water Illusion. Using basic attacks and abilities doesn't break stealth, and the decoy replicates Aquang's other basic abilities at 50% value in their draconic versions. Draconic Dragon Call. Additional dragons circle around Aquang at a distance, leaping to any enemy that contacts them. Refiring Dragon Call can consume these dragons as well for additional damage. Draconic Wildstorm. Now hits in a circular AoE around Aquang and counts as a basic attack for all purposes. So this one is a little crazy and might be too much considering Aquang's ultimate is already very powerful, but perhaps they could increase the cooldown, reduce the execute threshold, or reduce the heal to compensate. And CC immunity does still hard counter this, as he needs to get an execute to get these draconic abilities. I thought it was pretty cool though. I always like gods that can gain access to more powerful versions of their basic abilities temporarily, and it felt like it fit quite well for Aquang. Moving on though, I have a Changa +1 next, which is a bit more of a silly one. When the Jade Rabbit brings you an item, he also brings you a random basic potion or ward. At level 20, he will no longer bring potions, and there is a rare chance for an Obsidian Dagger, Runic Bomb, Eyes of the Jungle, or Queen Naga Egg. So yeah, as I said, this one is very silly, and especially the RNG element of getting a random Obsidian Dagger out of nowhere in the late game might be too much. But I love the new consumables they added for jungle camps and bosses, and wanted to integrate them into the passive. The pre-level 20 part is definitely doable and completely fine though, just so you don't have to send the rabbit back for a potion or a ward. He will just bring those free of charge whenever you buy a normal item. Next up though, we have Kuribdis, which is the first +1 that is more of a shift than an outright buff because of something problematic in her kit. Whirlpool form now has a longer startup, but fires splinters in all 8 directions on entering, refiring, and leaving the whirlpool. These splinters proc basic attack item effects at 20% value. So if you've watched me for a while, you know that I absolutely hate how free Kuribdis 3 is with its instant cast time. Other similar abilities last less time, like Raman and Changa, or have a wind-up like Soul 3, so adding some counterplay via a small wind-up before she becomes immune would be great for helping her frustration factor in my opinion. However, to compensate for that nerf, it now fires the splinters from her 1 in all directions up to 3 times during the ability, and these proc basic attack item effects at reduced value to give her some synergy with her attack chain. Next up we have Kakullan, where I'll be tweaking his rage form a little bit. Entering rage form slows nearby enemies, increasing in duration based on how long ago you last transformed. While in rage form, Vent Anger can be toggled on to increase the area of effect and vortex enemies towards him. However, while toggled on, Kakullan's rage time decreases at twice the normal rate. A little extra slow to help him stick to enemies, and a vortex with an opportunity cost of giving him less time in rage mode. It's a pretty simple change, but I always felt like his 2 in rage mode just isn't an ability, which I guess is sort of the point, but I like the idea of letting him toggle it for extra effects at the cost of draining his rage quicker. It's also very thematic since the ability is called Vent Anger. He vents all his anger and goes back to normal more quickly. And a similar kind of ability is up next for Fafnia's +1. Fafnia can now refire his ultimate while transforming to reduce the duration to 10 seconds and the cooldown to 40 seconds. So this is a simple change but alleviates one of the biggest issues Fafnia has, which is how swingy his gameplay can be. You can either annihilate everyone while ulting or don't and do nothing for a long time afterwards because his base kit is so underwhelming on its own. They've tried to fix this by increasing the duration of his ultimate as you rank it up and it now sits at a whole minute, but I like this idea as it lets you control it a bit more. If you just feel like one rotation of your dragon abilities will be enough, you refire the ult, do your thing, and it's only on a 40-second cooldown. But if you feel like it's going to be a longer fight, maybe over an FG or on a siege, you can use the ultimate as normal and get the long duration but long cooldown. Next up is Gilgamesh, where my +1 is actually to his drop kick. Kicking an enemy into a wall breaks off chunks of material that fly at nearby enemies, dealing damage. If that wall was the winds of Shamash, strong winds fly to allies instead, boosting their movement speed. If that wall was an enemy, non-ultimate player-made wall, it breaks instantly on contact. Dropkick is already a really cool ability, why not make it cooler? Imagine kicking someone into a Ymir wall, chunks fly off and ping nearby enemies and the wall instantly shatters. Or kicking someone into your ultimate walls to boost everyone's movement speed. Just seemed like a cool idea for an already cool ability. Moving on though, next up I have a really simple one for Hebo. Atlas of the Yellow River's effects now linger on targets for 2 seconds after leaving the area. Hebo is already a bit of a problem character, and I definitely wouldn't advise giving him any more damage or cooldown reduction, so I think the best way to go would be upping the utility that his 2 provides. More speed for him and allies after they leave the carpet, more slow on enemies after they leave the carpet. Simple. Next up is another simple one for Hel, who is also a bit of a problem character in her own way. When an enemy affected by Hinder casts a non-ultimate ability, its cooldown is increased by 10%. When an ally is hit by Cleanse, their active cooldowns are reduced by 2 seconds. Just adding a little more utility to Hel's main utility ability, more cooldown on enemies, less on allies. Simple. Next up I have a +1 for the main man himself, the one true king. While above 80 energy, King Arthur gains +10 cooldown rate and restores 2% max health and mana whenever he hits an enemy god with an ability, once per target per ability. These effects persist for 5 seconds after using Excalibur's Wrath. If you follow the channel, you might have seen me talk about this idea before, and before the introduction of Phoenix Shield, it was my way to give Arthur the old Glad Shield effect back, but with a limitation. I still think this works as a +1 even with Phoenix Shield in the game though. It's a powerful effect for sure, but there's a cost in that once he uses Excalibur's Wrath, these effects will go away until he can build up enough energy again. Do you let the ult rip for damage and CC, or do you hold it to keep these powerful effects active? The choice is yours. Next up is another simple one that aims to fix a small problem with a god's design, that being Giannis. Portal's base cooldown is reduced by 4 seconds if it is placed on the ground. Additionally, allies can interact with a grounded portal to banish themselves and gain bonus protections on landing. So this one aims to incentivize Giannis players to use grounded portal more, as the current way Giannis is best used is to just spam the 2 on cooldown and keep your portal for safety, which leads to a somewhat frustrating gameplay pattern. This wouldn't change that, of course, but it would give a lot more reward to placing portals on the ground, which might make Giannis players less likely to just hold the ability for a wall every single time. Next up though, we have Mercury, who is actually coming to the game very soon and might even be out by the time you watch this video. We'll see how the team's +1 changes compared to mine in that case. Mercury gains Messenger Shoes at game start, an item that provides +2% movement speed, increasing to 20% for 10 seconds after leaving the fountain, disabled by combat. These shoes can be upgraded for 2,000 gold once Mercury has traveled 2,000 meters of total distance in that match. Once upgraded, they become Talaria boosts, which provide +5% movement speed, 35 strength, and 20% attack speed, with a passive that every 10 meters traveled by Mercury grants him a stack of Like the Wind. The active effect consumes all stacks, and Mercury's next successful basic attack on an enemy god deals 2 bonus damage for each stack removed. So this is a bit more of a crazy one, but personally, I really like gods that have specific unique items, and I felt like with movement speed being very limited in Smite 2 on the general item pool, giving Mercury an item that only he can access that gives movement speed would make sense. All of the numbers on this are of course adjustable. I actually have no idea how long it would take to travel 2,000 meters in a typical game, but my intent is that it will come online between about 12 and 15 minutes. Not super early, but quite a bit before starters come online, as I'd want Merc players to be able to use this at least a few times each game, even in short matches. The stats and damage can also be adjusted, of course. I like the idea of this, and as you might have seen, I like effects that give the player a lot of agency in how they use them. You can pop this regularly for a bit of consistent extra damage every time you take a fight, or you could hold it for 20 straight minutes and one-shot a guy. The choice is yours. Moving on though, next up is probably the closest to a straight-up rework that I'll have on the list, and that is Nox. Night Terror is replaced with a much larger version of Siphon Darkness, with higher damage on a 60-second base cooldown and slows enemies in the area by 10%. After casting her ultimate, Nox is Darkness's next Shadow Lock passes through gods, applying its effects to all enemies hit. Siphon Darkness is replaced, putting a Rune of Darkness on the ground that arms after 1 second and detonates when enemies step on it. On detonation, the rune deals damage in the area and marks enemy gods hit. When a marked god casts their next ability, its cooldown is increased by 10%. Siphon Darkness can also now be cast while channeling Shadow Lock and while inside an ally from Shadow Step. So yeah, as I said, this is the closest to a full-on rework on the list, but I truly believe Nox needs something like this when she comes to Smite 2, as she's a very frustrating design pretty much entirely thanks to her base kit combo. This change makes it so her combo is now on her ultimate but is much more powerful, hitting a way larger area and potentially hitting multiple gods if you can line them up for an AoE Shadow Lock that she gets after ulting. This kind of lockdown on a base 10-second cooldown is just not okay, but on a 60-second cooldown through her ultimate, it's much more acceptable to die for that if you're caught without beads. The replacement ability for Siphon Darkness is sort of inspired by her old 2 that detonated much more quickly and synergized with her old 1 that marked enemies. It also takes some inspiration from old Nox with an anti-mage property by increasing enemy cooldowns. And I just threw in the can be cast while channeling Shadow Lock or inside an ally thing as a little extra bonus, so you can Shadow Lock someone and guarantee the rune detonates on them, or you can actually do something useful while inside an ally. It was also important to keep the ability as an AoE wave clear tool so that she has something like that because we're removing that from the 2. What do you think of this one, and are you a Nox main or a Nox hater? Let me know down below, as this is probably the most extreme change on the list, but I think she needs something extreme when she comes to Smite 2 personally. Next up is a more simple one though with Shiva, whose change is inspired by the changes Hades got in Smite 2. While performing the Shiva Tandava, Shiva may cast Emblazoned Sweep or Damaru's Tempo. Emblazoned Sweep hits a larger area, and Damaru's Tempo hits in a circle around him instead of a line in front. So yeah, as I said, this one is inspired by the Hades change, as I think Shiva and Hades ults are very alike in Smite 1. Potentially powerful, but long channel times and easy to escape from, which means they often get very little value in practice. This one will work slightly differently, as I don't intend to get him a free cast of one ability during the ult. He simply can cast these abilities if they're off cooldown and trigger the normal cooldown, but they have their enhanced effects. This would let him keep enemies in range of his dances more effectively and actually get some value from it, similar to the changes Hades got in Smite 2. Did you like the Nox changes? Because I've got something almost as big planned for Pesphany. All changes to her 2 from the previous rework are reverted. She gets a new passive. The after death portion of the ability no longer exists, but she's still getting seeds from withered plants. When entering the fountain, Pesphany now has 3 options for her seeds: sell, eat, or keep. Sell works as it does now, gaining 3 gold for each seed. Eat reduces her current respawn timer by 1% per seed, and keep saves the seeds for later use. She also gets a new ultimate. Pesphany creates a large garden at the target location. After 1 second, plants and vines spring from the ground, damaging, rooting, and crippling all enemies in the area, and creating a 3rd stage plant at their location. So yeah, probably the second most crazy set of changes on the list after Nox, but again, I think Pesphany needs them. Reverting the change to her 2 is an easy one. It was by far more interesting before the rework and wasn't really the big problem with her kit in the first place, in my opinion. Her old passive can't come back though. That was problematic in my view, and her current passive is just useless, so I would just remove it entirely. Giving her the option to reduce her respawn timer with C's keeps that flavor alive in her kit though. And again, this gives some agency and decisions to her passive. Currently, it just sells the seeds automatically and you never think about it. Now, you could sell them if you need an item, you could eat them to get back in the action quicker, or save them to stockpile and get a massively reduced respawn timer later in the game. I also think her current ultimate is a problem in the way that completely missing it can still give great reward, and your own teammates being brainless and getting hit by it can cause you to die. The new ultimate just creates a large garden, and after a delay to allow for some counterplay, does a similar effect while creating plants for synergy with the rest of her kit. Again, similar to Nox, let me know if you like these ideas down below, and if you're a Pesphany main or a Pesphany hater. Next up though is another pretty crazy one, but not in the rework territory this time, and that's Ratatossker, where I went with the obvious choice of +1 and looked at his Acons. Thistlethorn and Thickbark Acons are left as is. Bristlebush is replaced with Opal, which has passive. Dart now passes through enemy gods, damaging all in its path, and is treated as a basic attack for all purposes. Active, for 10 seconds, Dart will refresh its cooldown if it hits a unique enemy god. Hitting the same god twice triggers Chain Lightning that bounces to nearby enemy gods, dealing damage and proccing basic attack item effects at 50% value, cooldown 60 seconds. Evergreen is replaced with Topaz, which has passive. Dart now passes through enemy gods, damaging all in its path and dealing bonus damage based on your protections. Active, for 10 seconds, Dart will reset its cooldown if it damages a unique enemy god. Hitting the same god twice stuns them and heals Ratatossker and all nearby allies, cooldown 60 seconds. Call me an old rat sim, but I loved his old Acons and the gameplay they brought to the table, especially Opal and Topaz, which are the 2 Acons I would bring back as active items in place of his 2 least popular Acons. I think bringing back these effects as actives with a cooldown is not only more interesting, but also more balanceable. Opal was always pretty broken, but if you can only get that effect on a cooldown, it's much more manageable. Topaz was never that that good, but with it being on an active, you can push the power level more by giving him prot scaling on the dash and heals when he stuns a god. Keeping 2 of his old passive icons still lets people play that active item free playstyle if they want to, and Thistlethorn and Thickback were the 2 most popular icons, so keeping those makes sense. Okay, that's a lot of complex ones in a row. Let's go back to a simple +1 with Raven. When hit during overhead kick, Raven reduces his other active cooldowns by 1 second for every 10% max health he would have lost. I already think Raven is one of the best designs in the game, and he just works, so a simple +1 here that just rewards proper usage of his 2 seemed a bit more fitting for him. Dodge a massive Vulcan ult and you reset your entire base kits and a good chunk off of your ultimate. But if you only dodge a Vulcan meatball, you'll only get a few seconds off. This only reduces his other active cooldowns though. To prevent looping this, if it reduced its own cooldown, that would be pretty silly. Another simple one is up next with Tia, who is another one of those gods that is somewhat problematic already, so adding more CC or mobility or whatever is probably not the way. For 5 seconds after using Lawbringer, Tia shares his passive with nearby allies. This is a simple but effective +1, I think. Tia's passive is deceptively powerful, and instead of giving him more ways to be a nuisance on his own, giving some benefits to his team seemed more appropriate. Moving on though, let's do another more complex one with Cersto, where I'm replacing his ultimate. Cersto grows larger in size and gains bonus damage mitigation that decays over the duration, while in giant form, Certo's other abilities gain bonus effects. The passive can now stack infinitely and stacks fall off 1 at a time. Flames of Muspel gain stacks at double the normal rate, and Certo gains a damage shield equal to 50% of the bonus magical damage dealt on hit. Giant's Grasp can now grab an enemy god. If a god is grabbed this way, they can only be held for a maximum of 1 second before being automatically thrown. And Ember Walk creates a second, larger ring and leaves an additional burn effect on enemies. This burn is refreshed in duration as long as they contact one of the rings and lasts for 2 seconds afterwards. So this is another one that if you follow my channel somewhat closely, you might have heard before. Not this specific change, but me complaining about Certo's ult being boring, useless, and not fitting with his pressure-based game plan. His base kit is amazing and has great synergy. Pressuring out and sticking to enemy gods with it feels great, until you press your ultimate and take yourself completely out of the fight for several seconds and lose all that momentum you are building. This ultimate lets him keep his foot on the gas and enhances his already cool base kit with extra effects, and it'd be a lot more fun to play this way in my opinion. And yes, I know, I'm a simp for ultimates that enhance your base kit. Next up though, we have another pretty over-the-top +1 with Skadi, who much like Arachnne could probably use a rework of some kind when moving to Smite 2 in my opinion, but for this change I'm not doing that, I'm just giving her a regular +1. Skadi gains a choice of Beastmaster Amulet, an item that she starts the game with and can be upgraded at level 15 for 2000 gold. Protector's Amulet gives health and protections, more when upgraded, and Kaldar's attacks now steal protections. His dash is replaced with a Howl that gives himself and all nearby allies a damage shield. Kaldar's base hit points are 8 with this amulet. Hunter's Amulet gives attack speed and lifesteal, more when upgraded, and Kaldar attacks faster, and his attacks proc Skadi's basic attack item effects at 50% value. His dash is replaced with a swift dodge, making him immune for 1 second, and granting himself and nearby allies bonus attack speed. And finally, the Frozen Amulet gives strength and cooldown rate, more when upgraded, and Kaldar functions as normal with this amulet, with the addition of his attacks proccing Skadi's ability item effects at 20% value. So this takes a bit of inspiration from Vulcan's mod system, and is a bit of a built-in aspect style of change, but I like the idea of customizing your Kaldar to fit what you're building and playstyle you want to use. You can go tanky and have Kaldar steal protections and give allies damage shields while having higher hit points. You can go traditional attack speed hunter and have Kaldar attack faster, dodge attacks, and boost allies attack speed. Or you can go normal ability based Skadi and play as you normally would with her, with a small added bonus of Kaldar proccing ability item effects at reduced value. You might have realized by now, but I really like giving players agency and choices in god kits where you can use them in multiple ways, and this idea is probably the most direct and obvious one on the list. But that's 20 of my ideas for +1 changes that Smite gods could get when making the move to Smite 2. Which one was your favorite? Let me know down below, and don't forget to drop a like if you want to see part 2 of this, showcasing some more of my ideas. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.